Sirius XM 111 Business Radio powered by the Wharton School. Welcome back to the show on a Thursday. Great to have you with us. Just a reminder, we're with you each and every weekday, 10 a.m. East, 7 a.m. Pacific, right here on Sirius XM 111. And if you can't catch us live, we have our replay shows in the evening, 10 p.m. East, 7 p.m. Pacific time. Well, the growth of kids playing all kinds of sports has led into a growing wave of travel teams. Families spending much of the spring and summer traveling to resort towns for baseball and softball tournaments, or traveling in the winter for basketball and hockey tournaments. And that's just a couple of the sports. The business of youth athletics has become a multi-million-dollar industry, and one that continues to show room for more growth. One of the companies trying to build in this industry to make it even bigger is Sports Facility Advisory and Sports Facility Management. Pathik is the company's CEO. He's also a partner in the Bo Jackson Elite Sports Group, which is in the business of helping to train kids to be better athletes. And we welcome Dev into the show today. Great to have you on.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I mean, it's funny. I see friends of mine that post photos of wherever they're traveling all spring and a good portion of the summer, whether it be, Charleston, South Carolina, or Ocean City, Maryland, and they're going on these trips, but a lot of them are because of the fact that their kids are playing in tournaments. How big has this grown? I guess I should say, how fast has this grown?
Well, I mean, interesting enough, so first of all, thrilled to be talking about the topic because these issues are critical to our society, right? If you think about what kids are faced with today, it's very different than when we grew up. So,
yeah.
So getting kids into organized sports we see as a really important social benefit. But that said, it's also a great business. The sports travel industry is a $200 billion industry. It's the only, and you're talking about tournaments now, the sports travel segment within the travel industry was the only segment within the travel industry that grew every quarter throughout the recession.
Yeah.
So while everything else was down, while business travel was down and personal travel was down, parents putting their kids onto teams, more competitive, more elite travel-oriented teams, and traveling to destinations continued to grow. So that's just the travel segment side of it. Hundreds of billions of dollars over the last 10 years, and that segment continues to grow, especially for elite athletes, and primarily in that particular case for families that can afford that kind of spend. These families are spending on average about $2,300 a year at the standard level, and for super elite athletes, some of these families are spending $20,000, $30,000 a year.
What changed, though? I mean, obviously, kids have been playing on travel teams for many, many years, but it seems like maybe within the last 5 years, it has just ramped up.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of major changes. One, if you just look at it at a societal level, when we were kids and we'd go out and just play in the street, we had the opportunity to safely walk from our house to a park.
Sure.
Pickup ball was part of our life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's happened with the cost of college education has driven parents to look for new ways to fund kids' college education. You add that to the fact that most of us are no longer comfortable letting our kids walk even 10, 15 blocks down a local park. You put those two things together and you say, okay, we need our kids in structured and organized sport. And now you have the basis for a very competitive industry with even the USSSA, nonprofit organizations that put these teams together. They have an interest in generating revenue through tournaments, and then you have communities that have tapped into this. So Myrtle Beach, as an example, we're opening the Myrtle Beach Sports Center in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. We just opened Rocky Top Sports World. These are big developments, $15, $20 million, $30 million developments that are funded by the public entity for the purpose of attracting new visits into their marketplaces.
Right.
I think, but what changed is the safety and well-being of our kids. What's changed is the need for them to be in organized sport. And then the private sector has really stepped in. There was some defunding of public sport back in the 80s and 90s, and that has not, the funding has really not come back for recreational sports. So what we see is the private sector stepping in.
Having spent a lot of years working in professional baseball that I did, I've seen a little bit of this going around, especially the eastern half of the U.S. I used to go to Columbus, Georgia which has a huge softball complex down there along the banks of the Chattahoochee River, right there by their minor league baseball stadium. That they would have softball tournaments there, left, right, and center. And then you've mentioned all of your complexes that you have. A lot of people obviously know about the Ripken complex in Maryland. There's the Disney complex in Florida. As you mentioned, these are big revenue drivers for communities, especially the smaller communities that really are looking to add to their tourism dollars. When you think about, I guess, hotel room nights and people going to their local restaurants and spending in their local stores, it becomes big business.
It's big business. Think about the business of sports tourism. If you put that umbrella in it, you take Myrtle Beach. Myrtle is the third largest tourist destination in America behind Vegas and Orlando.
Because of all the golfing.
Because of golf. It starts with golf.
Yeah.
There's a Ripken baseball complex there. We're bringing the Myrtle Beach indoor sports complex there. There's Grand Park. Myrtle Beach is in large part based on sports tourism. It is really kind of a grandfather of seeing this opportunity. But it's happening everywhere. If you mentioned Ocean City, Maryland, and Delaware, there isn't a tourist destination in America, Branson, Vegas, Orlando, and smallers. There isn't a tourist destination in America that isn't trying to figure out how to get into the sports tourism industry.
Right.
In Clearwater, we've got minor league baseball and spring training, but we also have road races and endurance races. It's 110,000 room nights in this community alone.
Yeah. 1-844-WHARTON, 1-844-942-7866 is the number if you'd like to ask a question of Dev about the sports travel and tourism industry, which he is adeptly knowledgeable on. What type of, we're talking about complexes for outside sports and inside sports, both that you are developing, correct?
That's exactly right. So you take, I'll mention Rocky Top Sports World in Gatlinburg. It's an 80-acre complex. It's 7 artificial turf fields. They're artificial turf because in the sports tourism market, your inventory has to be ready for play, whether it rains or snows, right?
Yeah. Well, you can't have turf. You can't have grass.
That's right, and that's changing as well. So you're seeing, and then I'll talk about Rocky Top, and then maybe we can talk about what's happening at the technology level and the playing surfaces. And then Rocky Top also has a 90,000 square foot indoor basketball, volleyball environment, brand new, fully lighted, perfect hardwood floors. So Rocky Top's a great example of what you're talking about: indoor and outdoor, year-round, weatherproof environments. And as you go north, the indoor facilities, you see more indoor soccer and lacrosse, indoor turf facilities being built as well.
Yeah, especially in this area, in the Philadelphia area, and I'm sure it's the same like on Long Island and down in Maryland and St. Louis and other portions of the country. Lacrosse itself is really becoming a year-round sport because of the availability of teams and the kids and the players to want to play it year-round.
No question about it. If you're inside the industry, you know that while football is really struggling with some of the concussion issues, lacrosse hasn't gotten that particular press, even though it's part of it. But lacrosse is a sport. Well, from the private sector side, lacrosse is a sport where players play. They pay for their league play per player.
Yep.
Versus soccer, which is paid per team. So the revenue is much higher for lacrosse. If you're operating an indoor turf facility and you can offer lacrosse, you're going to move in that direction. And I'm not suggesting that all of this is in the best interest of our kids either, because what we're doing with the private sector, driving a lot of this, is we're creating access issues that are preventing people who are underserved and communities that are underserved from getting access to venues. So there are also significant national initiatives happening to address those things. We're very involved in those issues because we all have an interest in making sure that as many of our kids get into organized, well-structured, safe play as possible.
You mentioned about some of the cities that your company is involved with. I would imagine that them being a resort destination does play a role in this, because you really can't have a city in the middle of New York State, which really isn't close to any major hub, that can have a complex like this and support it. It Is that a big factor in it?
It's a big factor. So when we look at, we're hired by cities to do analysis to help them look at, what should we build? And oftentimes it's a municipality or a county that may not have much tourism infrastructure at all.
Right.
But if you don't have a bed base, if you don't have the hotels to start with, then building a Conrad overnight stays is only going to produce those overnight stays across whatever boundary, right?
Yeah.
The next county or where the hotel rooms are. So you won't see the tax revenue from it. So it's thinking about developing sports tourism destinations. We're counseling cities on a variety of issues like the tax abatement and incentives that are necessary to attract hoteliers in combination with the development of their sports tourism assets. So really what you end up with is a conversation about tourism infrastructure, which you're exactly right. You can't just build it and they will come. It has to be built. You have to have recreation, lodging, and other amenities, dining amenities to make the destination attractive.
Yeah.
Because you have to get with Myrtle Beach and Gatlinburg and Ocean City, Maryland, and Branson, Missouri, and so on and so forth. So you have to have all that infrastructure, and then you have to have management. This is now a highly competitive business. So no longer is it the domain of the public entity, Parks and Recs Department, to manage these venues. It's become competitive, and as most people understand, once a business is competitive, it should no longer reside in the public sector side from a marketing and a management standpoint.
So then, from we're talking about the technological aspects to this, from the county's management side, if you put in a complex like this and having them being the artificial surfaces that are out there now, that is obviously one large step in terms of the maintenance of those facilities, of those fields going forward, because obviously there is not as much maintenance needed. There is some, obviously, but not even half or three-quarters of what you would need for, say, grass fields.
That's right. You can't have to rest the field. And part of it is, if we were to ask any municipality, whether it's Philadelphia or Tampa, whoever our client might be, if we were to ask them what the objectives are, they'll always say it's tourism and creating an asset that the community can access.
Sure.
So if you want kids to go to play on it Monday through Thursday on a regular basis, you have to have playing surfaces that don't get destroyed when it's now time for a tournament. So the playing surfaces are one of the technologies. And if you look at sport, what's happened, and this is true in so many areas of our society, but what's happened is that the resources and technologies, playing surfaces and other things that were once available only to professional athletes, collegiate athletes, and Olympic training environments are now trickling down. These organizations go out and they see a perfectly manicured artificial turf field and they envision that for their community. So now we're seeing artificial turf move into the youth and amateur space in a very, very rapid way. We'll do almost 9 million square feet of artificial turf facilities in the next year.
Wow.
9 million. Year and a half, I should say.
9 million?
9 million. Think about that. So
okay, well, let's put that in perspective. Okay, let's just say the normal soccer field. How many square feet is one soccer field?
Well, it depends on the size of I think the total number of assets that represents, and I'm not the specialist on our design side,
okay.
So some of that is artificial turf for various types of training, like training tracks. And
sure. Okay.
But basically, we're doing about 600 acres of outdoor complexes.
Wow.
And within those, there will be so it's a lot. And then the court is the same thing. We've got 1.5 million square foot indoor facilities that are coming online nationally. Those venues are core with professional grade lighting. The scoreboards, now video technology, so grandma in Omaha can watch a kid play in Myrtle Beach. We're seeing this, and then there's wearable technology. There is real-time performance predictive analytics, where measurements are being made for the amount of movement on a playing surface. So the team that moves the most wins the most, right? This has been up to satellites. We're seeing this, draw from professional and collegiate and pre-Olympic down into the youth and amateur level. That's very exciting. From a business proposition standpoint, it's transformational, and it's going to create access for kids, but challenging for underserved communities still.
Sure, exactly. We're talking with Pathik, who is the CEO of Sports of sports facility advisory and sports facility management. He's also a partner with the Bo Jackson Elite Sports Group, which I saw a video that I guess you guys had done with one of the media outlets about the facility that Bo Jackson is tied with up in Illinois, and that's a lot similar to what you do. It's obviously a little bit different, but having that partnership and being able to work with him, obviously he's a well-known name, even though he hasn't played sports within what I guess about 15 years or so. But he's still well thought of, and it's a name that draws attention from people.
Yeah, well, Bo, he's a stand-up man, and he's committed to the well-being of kids first and foremost, and secondly, he's the ultimate, cross-training athlete. So when he and the other partners, Jim Thompson and John Cangelosi and some other folks, got together and started conceiving of a training environment, they did a few things. They built the first dome in Lockport, Illinois, which is an indoor turf environment of training that is accessible. It's $20 per hour training sessions. They have a foundation that feeds into the program as well to create more access. But what's happening in terms of results there, because these kids are getting very, very high quality training, what's happening for them in terms of scholarships, in terms of their personal development, it's second to none in the country. So what we're doing with them in partnership is rolling out those facilities nationally so that we can create the kind of training that's necessary for kids to compete at this more elite at level, but also so we can just develop core character and leadership skills that all of our kids need, no matter what level they're going to play.
Part of this, as you kind of alluded to a little bit ago, is the parents. And the parents want to provide for their kids. And as you mentioned, people were still spending money during the heart of the recession on these types of trips, travel teams, whatever it might be. And partly to what we discussed about the fact that they would like to have their kids be able to maybe qualify for a college scholarship somewhere down the road, partly because of the fact that college costs have just skyrocketed over the last decade.
No question about it. And in some cases, the parents are delusional, to be quite honest.
Well, that's a whole different show.
Yeah, well, but there is a hyper focus on performance for kids that starts so young that in some cases it's actually counterproductive.
Yeah.
But that being said, you're right. That what's driving it is the psychology of wanting the very best for a kid, believing that sports might be a pathway towards not just scholarship, but towards that kid's development.
Yeah.
And in many cases, those parents are shelling out the average for, say, an athlete who's on travel sports is about $2,300 a year.
Yep.
But we hear of families that have 60 or 70 games a year, and many of them in destinations distant from their homes. You know that those families are spending $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 a year. Sometimes money they don't have.
I can tell you, one of my friends, I was actually just talking to his wife on the train coming into Philadelphia the other day, talking about their schedule with their son who plays youth hockey, and I think he's 7 years old. And he did one tournament last weekend. They're going to Ocean City, Maryland in 2 weeks. It ends up being a very consuming part of a family's life. But as you alluded to, there are obviously a lot of positives that the kids can take from being involved in these activities, obviously as long as it's not overdone.
No question about it. And when you think about the benefits, aside from health, we have this obesity crisis.
Sure.
We have an inactivity crisis in our country with kids playing video games and other things.
Yeah.
So creating access to sport and recreation and maintaining that is really important. But you're right. There are clear connections and studies that tie sports participation to academic achievement.
Yeah.
When compared to kids who don't play sports at all, certainly the health and wellness and obesity prevention. And then there's just an education that occurs for kids, and especially now as you start to bring technology in and kids are looking at analytics and metrics and baseline testing. I think we're going to see an infusion of math and science and technology that will turn sport into something that's even more useful for kids, even the kid that might not be super elite, who gets access to the kinds of technology that they wouldn't get access to if they weren't playing in an environment like a Bo Jackson's or a Ripken kind of facility.
There is obviously a level of this where if you have a child that maybe hasn't been involved in sports a ton and gets involved and has a little bit of a level of success, that child will continue to play that because of the success that they have had.
No question about it. There's confidence, there's team building. There are all these baseline skill sets that, for those of us who played sport, and developed those skills as we were growing up, we may not have associated all of them with those experiences. But if you compare that to a kid, who lives on a farm, who doesn't play on a team, who doesn't get out and interact with other kids as much, to use an extreme example, or who's in an inner city environment and shows up at home, latchkey kid, has to play video games.
Yeah.
The development of those two kids, or those three kids, the one that's actually on the team and with a group, it is just extraordinary in comparison. So these are important things, and I think that's part of the reason from a business perspective. I don't believe this is a trend, and there are groups, the Aspen Institute, Sport and Society, Nike, we're involved with that, are trying to do things to improve access, to get more facilities developed in more communities, to have those facilities properly financed.
Yeah.
If you look at the Wall Street side of this, the financing of a facility determines how it's going to, and how leveraged it is going to determine how much operating expense and debt service it has on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And when properly financed, these facilities can create more access opportunities for kids that, at that underserved and lower end income. So all of those things are happening now. They're part of the national dialogue, especially as we see this recession ending and money coming back into the marketplace.
We're talking with Pathik, who's the CEO of Sports Facility Advisory and Sports Facility Management. And I guess that's the other aspect of it in the last couple of minutes that we have here, Dev, is that in terms of these facilities that you are building, there is also the management aspect that you are involved in as well, should that be the case, correct?
Yeah, what happened is when we started our first firm, the Sports Facilities Advisory, which I founded in 2003, what we recognized was that a firm was needed to produce institutional grade financial forecasts for these kinds of assets, whether it's a community rec center or it's a news tourism destination. These are, 10, 15, 20, $40 million endeavors.
Yep.
And public entities were financing them based on what a Parks and Recs director might have said, who didn't necessarily have a finance background. So we came in and we developed the research process to accurately forecast these models. We started delivering those to the National Park Service and other clients who wanted us to deliver them, and in many cases they'd send us straight, and they'd shove that document back across the table and say, make it happen, right?
Yeah.
They recognized that no matter what the market said, there was a real need for expert professional management.
Yeah.
So we formed the Sports Facilities Management to achieve the financial forecast that we put on paper at SFA, which is extraordinary and very different. There's no other firm in the world that will do that in this market space, youth and amateur sports. So now cities like Tampa and, I mentioned Myrtle and Round Rock, Texas, and Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and Muskogee, Oklahoma, and so on, are hiring us not just to produce the financial forecast, but to then manage those facilities, to bring full-time, everyday staff, all the marketing, every single aspect of it.
It is an amazing business, Dev, and congratulations on your success and obviously continued success as well.
Thank you. Glad to be with you today. Appreciate the time.
Great to have you. Dev Pathik, who's the CEO, as we mentioned, of Sports Facility Advisory and Sports Facility Management. Very interesting website and obviously very interesting business that they have. And as he mentioned, and pretty much every parent knows, it is an unbelievable business right now, unbelievable growing business that's going to continue to grow. You don't expect it's going to stop growing anytime in the very near future. Hour number 1 of Knowledge at Wharton is in the books. Hour number 2 coming up. And in hour number 2, we're going to